welcome to the SPRTER Podcast.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining. I'm Tilo, the founder of the SPRTER app, and I'm excited to introduce you to our audience. We are talking to Peter Barrett, MMA fighter who's been in the UFC for over 10 years, and he's a featherweight fighter, has been in MMA since 2011, and it's got a record of 11-5. Although I thought there's a 12th win, right?
6 and
12-6.
I've been fighting for over 10 years. I have not been in the UFC for over 10 years. I just want to clarify.
All right. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's been the goal the whole time, but yes.
All right. Welcome to the show, and thank you for the correction as well. Before we get started, I also want to make sure we mention your profile on the SPRTER app, where our fans, our audience can book some unique experiences with you, get some nutritional advice, get training sessions, meet and greets, all of those awesome things to connect further with you and learn from you. With that, welcome to the show. Walk me back to how did it all start? How did you develop a love for fighting? Because at your level, you have to love it in order to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say, let me sit back here. So the sun's like kind of not sitting. I'm like the sun just looks really weird where I'm at. But sorry. So it all started like high school wrestling, I guess would be where I kind of got my feet wet in like a one-on-one competition. And, you know, the reasons why I fell in love with wrestling is because unlike football or baseball or basketball, you know, if you messed up, it was on you. You couldn't look at someone else and say, oh, I got tackled because I missed a block, or the play fell apart because there was a hole in the line, or, you know, he missed his pick and whatever. All the other sports, a lot of the other sports, there's a lot of accountability on your teammates for everything to go well. Wrestling, it was just you, your opponent, and the referee on the mat. And the only way you were getting out of there with your hand raised is if you beat your opponent. And there was a lot of similarities between that and fighting and the training that goes with fighting. So, you know, I was a career athlete my whole life. You know, played the more traditional sports here in America, football, baseball, basketball. Towards high school, I started to get into lacrosse. While in high school, I started wrestling. And then I played rugby through college, and then got back involved with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and some Muay Thai, and really just fell in love with a lifestyle that could turn into something else. You know, just the jiu-jitsu training, the fight team training, everything really reminded me of wrestling. And I was watching, you know, established athletes in the community that I was living in doing this and being successful with it, and managing to you know, live a semi-normal life without a semi-normal job. At the time, this is all, you know, 2009, 2010, 2011, right when I was getting out of college. So it was a much different environment than it is now, but still a lot of similarities.
That's a really awesome background and for our audience. So thanks for sharing that. Now, when you came out of college, you're like, hey, I really enjoy this. I'm good at it. But was there a moment where you're like, you know what, I am so much better than most of these guys here? And most of us, they don't like to brag about that. You know how it is. But like, what's that moment of, hey, I could really make a career out of it. I could go pro.
Yeah, I mean, so I got into fighting with the goal, with the dream to get into the UFC and to compete at levels. And I knew it was gonna come down to a lot of hard work, a lot of discipline, a lot of dedication, a lot of, you know, long days, early mornings, late nights. So a little bit before I kind of embraced the lifestyle completely, I was working a full-time job, which a lot of people would have considered a career and would have been content with only doing that. But my younger brother was still fighting with me at the time. We were living together. We were working for the same company. So we'd get up at, you know, say 5 a.m., be out of the house by 5:30, out to the gym by 6, train until 8, get to work by 9, work until 5, go back to the gym until, you know, 6 to 9, get to bed as early as we could, rinse, wash, and repeat. We did that for like 3 or 4 years, really just grinding and hustling. And it came to a point where I said, it just so happened that my uncle was opening a new restaurant, a new big sports bar restaurant, which in the area has a great reputation. So all the things kind of aligned perfectly for me to be able to walk away from, a 6-figure salary job with commissions and whatnot, and be able to adjust my lifestyle to really just get to the bare necessities, make enough money to keep my butt in the gym, pay all my bills. And that's kind of been the balance of, do I work more? Do I train more? Do I want to focus more on personal training? Do I want to focus on nutritional coaching? Because, with fighting, to get to the next level, you have to understand all aspects of the game. And for me, I really dove deep into the nutrition and not the supplement side, but definitely nutrition side, how to cut weight, the appropriate ways to cut weight, the best way to eat and maintain energy while staying at a deficit. Because, what a lot of people don't realize is, it doesn't matter what diet you subscribe to, you're not going to lose weight if you're not at a caloric deficit. And you got to be able to balance a caloric deficit that gives you enough energy to train, work, and compete all day, while also not putting too much into the tanks where you're not losing the weight that you need to lose to get on the scale, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks down the road. So I really went deep on the nutrition side to better understand my body. And that's just, there's so much information there, and people just, I talk to people at work when I'm at the bar working, and they're like, how are you going to lose 20 pounds in 6 weeks? You don't have any weight to lose. And I'm like, little do you know, you who eats out, 5 nights a week, drinks 6 nights a week, and thinks that you're a healthy person. Like, there's plenty of ways to lose 20 pounds over 6 weeks. You just don't see it because there's too much cognitive dissonance going on here. You look at yourself and say, oh, I had a salad 2 days this week. How come I didn't lose any weight? It's an everyday thing, So I really enjoy that aspect of the fighting as well, because it gives me a way to give back to people pretty readily.
That's pretty amazing. And I do have a few questions later on in terms of the nutritional aspects, that because you share so much on your socials as well in relation to nutrition. Actually, let's dive right into it. Why not? How did you go about that? As in, like, there's a lot of knowledge floating around, but there's also a lot of what I consider false knowledge of, like, people claim they know and little do they know. So how do you go about that? How do you balance that? Where do you find your knowledge? And do you have 1 or 2 tidbits of, here are the 3 things to do or to look out for when thinking about your nutrition and boosting it to the next level? I know I've thrown a lot of questions at you.
Yeah, I think there was 3 or 4 there. So it really became, I got into the nutrition because I wanted to make my weight cuts easier. I wanted to be able to be as big as possible and weigh as little as possible at the same time, so I could be the biggest guy in the weight class versus, an average size guy or a smaller guy fighting up. I always wanted, because of my high school wrestling, that mentality was, you want to get as big as you can and then as small as you can in the shortest amount of time, so you can compete at the biggest possible size while still making weight. So that kind of set me on the journey of, I knew how to cut weight from high school. I knew how to make weight for high school wrestling. Come to find out, that's the worst way to do it. That there's no consistency in it. It's a nightmare. So I over the course of the years, had reached out to hire help. And, everybody's very sensational on Instagram. They can cater their information to make it look like, all of their customers are incredibly successful. And, I worked with some people that I had a fair amount of success with. I worked with some other people that were just kind of scratching the surface. And then I came across the 2 women at Perfecting Athletes, and they were huge in the UFC 5 or 6 years ago. And now that the UFC a lot of their own nutrition in-house, the ladies over at Perfecting Athletes have moved into the boxing world, where, you still get a lot of guys that don't really know much about nutrition who are competing at the highest level. They were a great asset for me to learn from. I think I used them 2 or 3 of camps, 2 or 3 of my camps, and then also one of in their seminars. They came out to the area, answered questions, just gave me more of an opportunity to work hands-on with them ask them some questions more specifically to me, hear how they answered other people's questions. And I kind of took, a lot of their information, coupled it with a lot of the information from Ori Hofmeckler, which he's the OG intermittent fasting guy. And he calls it the warrior diet. But essentially what he is talking about is intermittent fasting before someone coined the term intermittent fasting. And I don't think he's a doctor. I don't think he's a scientist. I just think he's, N equals 1. And this is what I saw as the most beneficial ways to do it. I think he's ex-Israeli special forces. So he goes into the Bible and says, these tribes were only eating these times and they were doing this. So he was looking back into history and seeing how more of the powerful military powers that ruled the world, what their soldiers were eating, like the guys that looked like the guys like the 300, how did they eat? So he goes into that, and that's a lot of, what do I want to say? There's a lot of, not necessarily the information that you could put, let's say like a peer reviewed paper on, but there's a lot of information that's pointing fingers into the right direction. Now come to find out he was right on the money. A lot of the science, the medical people, the nutritionists, the doctors, they don't like to give him any credit because he's from their world at all. But it's just balanced nutrition with a little bit of caloric restriction, and you can work wonders. Obviously for me, I'm a guy, so it's a little different for women. Women need carbohydrates all the time so they can produce the appropriate hormones for their bodies to work appropriately. Thankfully, us men don't have those systems, so we could run on keto like 6 months and have minimal long-term damage. Women, it's not the same. Women fighters, especially younger girls that don't do their weight right, like from what I understand, like their cycles are crazy, because they're not feeding their bodies appropriately. They're trying to get on a scale to make weight. So like I said, men don't have that issue. We can cut weight by just cutting out carbohydrates and keeping a high protein and fat profile and still succeed. So a lot of what I'm saying is more geared towards men than women, but a lot of it's low-hanging fruit at the same time.
And you share a lot of that on your social, which is awesome that you're actually sharing that. It's not like, haha, this is mine now, and I have that knowledge, and well, the rest of you figure it out. So that's awesome to see. For men, we do need a little bit of carbs for our brain, because the brain actually works mainly on carbs. But I totally agree. I think there's a lot of differences in how male and female bodies work. So it makes a lot of sense to delve deeper into that. Now, part of that is, you talked about cutting and you talked about consistency, right? So, and you said, well, I just can't go and eat and then cut. That is not consistent. And I'm sure consistency is also part of the whole game in terms of staying relevant and staying at the top. How do you stay consistent? And are there times that you feel like, you know what, I actually don't feel like it? And how do you overcome those times?
Well, to make it really short and simple, one healthy meal will not make you skinny, and one bad meal will not make you fat. So, if I know I'm going to go out on a Friday, I mean, I work on the weekend, so it's not, super. If I go out on a Friday night and I knew I was going to have cake and ice cream at somebody's party, I knew I wasn't going to, if I knew I was going to have a carb-rich meal, so whatever. You're going out to dinner, you're going to have a nice dinner, you're going to have a nice dessert. To prep for that day, I want to keep in my head, I want to keep everything balanced. So if I know I'm going to go have a carb-rich meal at night, I'll probably stick to my protein and fat during the day. Maybe I'll have, steak and eggs, or eggs and bacon, or some source high quality source of protein with some eggs and some bacon or some avocado, knowing that I'm going to get my carbohydrates later in the day. Another thing would be if I know I'm going out to a steakhouse and, they're not necessarily known for their, healthily roasted vegetables, maybe I'll load up on some greens before I go. But it's all about balance. And once you have a general understanding of what you're trying to eat, you can kind of look at you can go as far out and say, okay, I've got a crazy week ahead of me. I know that I've got so-and-so's dinner on Wednesday. I've got something with my parents on Friday, and then Saturday's a kid's birthday party. You want to at the whole week as one unit. Maybe you eat really healthy Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, knowing that Thursday, Friday, and Saturday are going to be tough. Then you could get that, blow it up even into a day. Wednesday is going to be a tough night because you're going to eat like crap. So maybe you put the discipline on making sure if you have breakfast, your breakfast is super balanced and healthy. If you have lunch, make sure your lunch is super balanced and healthy. And then by the time you get to dinner, the general impact of overeating for one meal isn't the same as if you just, ate by chance throughout the day and then you have an unhealthy meal. So before you know it, you grab McDonald's on your way to work, you grab Subway for lunch, and now you're going out to eat this huge dinner on top of it when you could, control the things that you can control and control as many of the factors in the situation that you can't control. So if I know, like I said, I keep going back to that example. If I'm going to have a big meal at the end of the day, I'm going to eat healthier during the earlier hours to help offset that.
That's awesome. So it's all about planning as well as seeing it as a bigger unit rather than compartmentalizing. That's really good knowledge. Thank you for sharing that. Now, when we think about all of that nutrition, obviously that gets us, it's there to get you in the ring. It gets you to your best shape. It gets you to like you want to compete, you want to win. Now, when was the first time you stepped foot in that UFC ring? Can you walk me through those emotions?
Yeah. So let me do you want to know the first time I fought or the first time I fought in the UFC?
Whatever you prefer, whatever was more meaningful to you or more emotionally meaningful to you.
I mean, they're both huge milestones, So my first amateur fight, I didn't get into fighting until I was a little bit older. So, I mean, from the minute I got into it, I think I was 25 for my first amateur fight. I trained with guys that are 19 that have fought 3 or 4 times. You know what I mean? Give you a comparison of where people are when they're getting started. So definitely a late bloomer. But I remember getting into fighting maybe 1 or 2 fights in and having a lot of people look at me and say, don't you think you're a little old to be going to this? There are people your age that are running around with belts, best in the world, just getting started. Yeah, that's cool. That's just, another opportunity to prove a bunch of people wrong. But it was really, the first fight was incredible because lost, a lot of emotion, a lot of craziness, a lot of not knowing what I was doing and just doing what I thought was right. So like I would say my first 3 or 4 amateur fights, I'd get out of the cage and people would be like, you remember this? And I'm like, nope. You remember this? Nope. I think I blacked out my whole fight. I was so angry, So to go from that as my first amateur fight to then making my UFC debut at the Apex Center in Las Vegas was just night and day. I was present. I was smiling. I was singing. I was dancing. I've lost a few people since I've started fighting that, I felt like were really there with me when I was walking into the cage to make that walk. There was a lot of adversity in my story before I got to the UFC. I fought on the Contender Series, which is like a product that Dana White created, where he pretty much takes 100 fighters over the course of 4 months and says, I'm giving out 25 contracts. Y'all got to fight each other. Whoever I'm most impressed by will get them. And he pretty much hosts dog fights for UFC contracts every Tuesday night out in Las Vegas. I had the opportunity to fight on that against another really, up and coming prospect out of South Korea. So even, making the walk for the Contender Series is up there. So I would say my amateur debut, huge milestone for my fighting career. The fight that I won before I got onto the Contender Series, another huge milestone. The Contender Series, a huge milestone. And then finally making my UFC debut. So what was crazy was I fought in, let's say, 2000 and maybe I was in the Contender Series 2019. And I fought at the end of the summer, August. That following spring, COVID shut everything down. So I was scheduled to fight in Oklahoma. Let's see, we shut down in March. The whole U.S., as far as the U.S. is concerned. I don't know where you are specifically.
Philadelphia.
All right, cool. So I was, I'm just whatever. Uh, so yeah, we all shut down like March. It was 2 years ago,
Yeah.
2 years ago, and you know the pulled the plug on the event. Everything was crazy. We thought we were still fighting. Gyms weren't open. You know, my manager saying, well, if you can only do road work, go do road work. If you can't get to the gym to spar with people, go do road work. If you can't do this, go do road work. Pretty much, if they want you to fight, you better be fighting. You better make weight. There's nothing we can do about it. And that was, you know, that was crazy. But when I finally got to make my UFC debut, it was just, I wanted to be super present. I wanted to be super happy. I wanted to soak up everything that I could and enjoy myself as much as I could while still getting out there to handle business. So, I mean, it was the culmination of a 10-year journey to get there, and to finally get there and understand that, have that feeling like this is the level at which I was, you know, born to compete at is one hell of a feeling that I don't know a lot of people will ever experience.
And it's obviously it's the highest level of fighting one arguably at the moment, and I've actually been to the UFC Training Center in Las Vegas. It's a really nice complex that they've built over there, so I can see the like having that accomplishment, being there training with the other guys. So it's a really cool complex, and that's those emotions going through someone from that amateur fight all the way to that moment must be pretty incredible. Now, COVID, as you said, has shut down a lot. I guess we're slowly, I mean, we're essentially back to normal mostly. And so you had a fight scheduled for the 2nd for this weekend, but that has been rescheduled to my knowledge. So your next fight is in July. Can you walk me through that fight? What are you doing in terms of preparation? Obviously, if you can't give away all of the secrets, I understand.
Definitely. So personally, I got a lot going on, a lot of moving parts right now. Just kind of made some life changes. So I told myself months ago, if I was, you know, if I had my own place and I was settled, you know, in my routines, that I would fight in April. Come to find out, the real estate, apartment renting, all of that is incredibly taxed and spread so thin and overpriced right now. So I would say it took me, I was planning on it taking me a month or two to find a place. It took me like 3 months to find a place. And I thought, you know what, just fight anyways, just go with it. And it kind of hit me where, you know, with everything that went on to get into the Contender Series, you know, I made a really big point about mental health and doing the right thing and not just trudging through things and, you know, kind of just going through the motions to go through the motions. And it hit me. I said, you know, if I used that opportunity with the Contender Series to advocate for mental health, what the hell am I doing right now, pushing through a big move, relocating, trying to set a schedule and fight all at the same time. Like, I'm either going to look like Michael Jordan or I'm going to look like Bozo the Clown. You know, even the promoter, I'm very friendly with the promoter, Cage Titans, the promotion that I'm fighting for right now. You know, he kept asking me, "You sure you want to fight? You got a lot going on. Sure you want to fight? You got a lot going on." And when I finally called him to tell him I wasn't going to fight, he's like, you know, as much as this hurts my show, I'm so happy that you made this decision, because I thought you were taking on too much. Some of the other people might have thought you were taking on too much. Not a lot of people will tell you these things, but, you know, that's why I kept asking. And I'm just proud that you've made the realization that there's a lot more to life than just fighting, and you need to handle those things appropriately. You can't just push through and fight. I mean, I went from an 8-0 record as an amateur, as a pro, to losing my first fight, losing my brother, losing my dad, losing my second fight, taking a third fight I shouldn't have taken, losing that fight. Now I'm 8-3. Going from being the number one guy in the Northeast, being eyed by the UFC, to like not even on the table. So I just, you know, I tried to take what I've learned throughout the years. It was really important for me to get my head right, get my patterns right, get my routines right, make sure I'm in a place where I feel supported with my decisions, and knowing, you know, tell my older brother, hey, I think I'm going to fight in April. He's like, why are you doing that? So I know he's questioning it. Even he knows how I train. knows how I am. Even with that aside, you know, it's nice to know that even my family was relieved when they found out I decided to hold off and wait a little bit and make sure all my ducks were in a row before I went and put up my dukes to go fight somebody hand to hand, you know. So that being said, I just got my keys to my new place today. I move in this weekend, and hopefully I get settled as soon as possible. And I'm aiming to not fight in July, but for June.
Okay. So, I mean, condolences, obviously, on all of those. That having to deal with that is, yeah, I can't imagine. And then having to go up against someone in a ring who wants to punch your face, essentially,
Right.
like those emotions. I think that makes a lot of sense to make sure that you're in a good place. Congratulations on the new apartment. That's always nice to see. Now, overcoming those moments you talked about, being an advocate for mental health, obviously I think particular in the fighting world, but not only the fighting world, I think any sport that is hyper masculine, being open about emotion and mental health is always a little bit of a stigma, but I think we need a lot more centered around it, and we need a lot more attention. So it's great that you are speaking up and raising awareness for that, and leading by example, as in being a role model. Like, hey, I needed to pull out because it was better for me. We have a whole bunch of other questions. I know I want to be cognizant of your time, but this is awesome. So if I can ask one more about your role models, as in, who are some people that you've looked up to, and how are you taking away some of their knowledge and trying to be a role model? Because we see that athletes are role model. You're inspiring the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, so a story that really resonated with me when I was going through a lot of my darkest times was the Gypsy King on Joe Rogan. Tyson Fury got on there talking about how he put on all the weight, you know, was so fat, so out of shape, was ready to kill himself, and, you know, just decided to start with little goals to get back in the gym, to get in shape, to, you know, pretty much get back to where he was before he let it all get away from him. And, you know, he was another one who wasn't necessarily willing to go on medication to get it done either. You know, when I made the decision to reach out for help, I decided I wanted to make sure I vetted a therapist to know that what they wanted to use as modalities and recommendations were something that I was open to. I didn't want to just walk in there, unload on someone, and be like, "Wow, man, you have a pretty tough life. Here, these will make you." Like, yeah, no shit. Well, I smoke enough weed to understand that. Like, I have my tools that I like to use, but that's not like I don't want to rely on them. I need to get back to a level playing field, and it was just, you know, his story was awesome because it was short-term goals that you could hit every day. Was to get to the gym, you know, do your best while you're there. And what it was really doing was setting me up for fight night, for when I was to look back at my whole camp. You know, did I show up on time? Did I give all? Did I give it my all? Was I at all my training sessions? Was I sober? That was a big question for a couple of years. Was I sober for most of my fight camp? And by making these small little goals, you know, dealing with the loss the way I should have, was able to turn my shit around, get back in the gym, show up, you know, and put one foot in front of the other, and really just get after it with self-discipline and a positive mental attitude. So his story really hit home with me. You know, there's guys, you know, podcasts that I like to listen to a lot that talk a lot about not so much psychology, more so philosophy, well-being, how to, you know, better yourself. But like the Aubrey Marcus podcast is one of my top three. Kyle Kingsbury podcast is up there. The Model Health Show, I mean, is he a role model in that respect? No, but like he has a lot of guests on with a lot of valuable information. But it's really just like, you know, even Jack Canfield, the Chicken Soup for the Soul guy, he's got a whole, you know, Tony Robbins, who else? Like even Jocko Willink. These are all guys, you know, in the self-help world that have a lot of low-hanging fruit. That if you, you know, start to apply some of these things to your lives, you like return on investment pretty quick. And, you know, it was, you know, like a little euphemism. You know, the difference between knowledge and wisdom is putting the knowledge to use. You know, so it came time for me to like put all the, like I've been listening to all these great people speak for all this time, and I've kind of just been scratching the surface with it, and it was time to dig deeper a little bit and really figure out what was going to work for me.
Yeah, that's really powerful, and it's really powerful advice also for what you mentioned earlier in terms of those small incremental changes leading up to a big change over time if you do them consistently. So big kudos to you for going through that and putting knowledge into wisdom. So that's pretty impressive. Now, Slippery Pete, the nickname itself, there's got to be a story behind it, and I want to finish this on an awesome note, because that's got to be an awesome story somehow.
Yeah, the story is completely unrelated to fighting, naturally. I hope. So my mom and dad separated when we were little, both remarried, and we were having a dinner party at my mom's house with my stepdad, his 4 daughters, their kids, and you know, the house was bustling. It was after dinner. Everybody had been drinking a little bit, and this was, you know, a year or 2, maybe 3 years before my stepfather passed away. His mind was getting a little bit. He was feeling pretty good, and we were all in the kitchen talking about all these vacations where my stepsister was going, you know, the house that we had in this town was really, really nice. We had a nice boat dock. We had this, we had that. She said, and this house was, the beach there at that house was really nice, this and that. And then, the sunset at this house was really nice. She goes, you know, I remember all the houses, but I don't ever really remember Peter being around. And my stepdad chimed in. He goes, who, Slippery Pete? Yeah, he was always out chasing the women. It just stuck, you know. I came back to the gym telling telling the story the next day, and like, that's it, dude. There it is, Slippery Pete. You're never gonna get away from that.
Yeah, that's good friends. They will not let something like that slip. and yeah, that's a really good story as well. Now, anyone of our guests, our audience here, wanting to connect more with you, make sure to follow Slippery Pete on Instagram, Slippery_Pete145, and Twitter, Slippery's World, as well as on the SPRTER app. And check out Peter's SPRTER profile on the SPRTER app to connect through some awesome experiences as well there. So great way to connect with him, learn from him, and just experience, well, his world. If you want to learn more about fighting, if you want to get some apparently pretty awesome life advice how to overcome adversity, it's all there. Check it out on the SPRTER app. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights, and good luck on the next fight.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too, brother.
Thanks. Bye.